Deep in the earth resides many, many life forms. Some in cold, frigid conditions. In the depths of the ocean, in the deepest corners. Some as far down as we've been able to dig in the crust, in the hot bits. Yes, it is true. Life exists despite intense temperatures. Although some life needs certain temperatures to survive. Some life needs perfect conditions to go forward, to move, to live, to thrive. But to take you for a moment further into the world of imagination, and even further away from the world of science, picture for a moment an organism deep, all the way down into the core of the earth, where things broil and boil and grind and turn. Well, below the parts that grind and turn, in the parts that ooze in magma and heat and fieriness. Picture a life form down that low. Perhaps not an amoeba or simple life form like you might truly find, but perhaps a plant, something that roots itself into the crust, something that, like the parts, like the magma itself, can kind of shift and form. So like a plant and a liquid, at least when heated, you know? Like water, but also with a stem and roots and buds and flowers. Flowers of hot red colors. And when those flowers are pollinated by, well, by the pure mix of magma around them from other flowers, because you don't need bees at that point. No. All you need is these things to flow out of the flowers into the magma and mix around and churn deep down inside, and then find another flower and seep deep into that flower. This oozy, not the gun. This liquidy, gooey, plant-like organism. And this plant, after those flowers are pollinated, starts to form a little bud. Starts to form a little, for the context of June, for the sake of this time of the year, a strawberry. Yes! A little strawberry. Now, for those of you who don't like the gummier textures of the world. Don't worry, this is deep inside the magma. You won't be able to bite into this anyway. This is scorching hot. This would burn your tongue off to be biting into this strawberry. But, and of course it would be gooey too, which you might find appalling. But, it is at the centermost point of the earth. So, strawberries are normally sweet, but this one, in addition to being deeply, deeply sweet, is also super rich in the earthy, maybe nutty flavors. Yes! An earthy, sweet, very unique tasting strawberry that never has been bitten into before by another life form, because down below, there are not any fish. They probably wouldn't eat strawberries, but work with me here. There aren't any fish swimming in the magma. Loch Ness is not down there. Although, topic for another story at some time, maybe. Bigfoot is not down below, eating a bunch of strawberries. I'm sure if Bigfoot is real, Bigfoot would be eating some strawberries. All those lovely mythical yokai from Japan are not down below. Although, maybe some of them are. I don't know if they have any volcanic yokai. I haven't heard of any. But at the very least, the kappa, are water-faring, sort of duckish-looking yokai that likes to pull the shirikodama out of people's buttholes, is not down in the magma, swimming below, keeping his water dish full of magma. No. The yokai are not down below. The Yuki Onna is most certainly not down below. Which, if you're not Japanese, basically roughly translates to Snow Woman. And they're not very pleasant in most of the mythology. But nonetheless, snow and magma don't mix, Perhaps some of the more magma-y Pokemon are based after yokai, and maybe they're down there, who knows? But they're not there eating these delicious volcanic? No, not volcanic. We'll call them earthy core strawberries. No, they're not. But at this point in the story, we are taken away from the deep center of the earth. Because as time has been moving on, as things have been changing in the climate, we've moved over the years and years and centuries to different climates. There have been ice ages and really, really hot periods of the earth. But these strawberries are relatively new. They maybe have only been around as long as humans have been. Yes. I don't know how long normal strawberries have been around, but these ones absolutely about the same time as us. They have not experienced such a hot change in the climate of the world above. Not the weather, keep in mind, but there just so happens to be certain hot points on the equator. Certain hot points on the equator where there are volcanoes. These volcanoes exist in the midst of rainforests and maybe not rainforests, but let's work with it. It's fiction right now. They exist in rainforests and in rocky terrain and near civilizations, and deep in forests and even on tropical islands. Or they are the island. It's just one mountain sprouting out of the middle of the sea. So we are taken to a place on the equator where one of these volcanoes is. Far, far away from civilization. Deep, deep, deep inside a relatively untouched forest. Very tropical. And this particular area in the Earth is experiencing a much, much hotter part of its, weather experience than most of these other areas. Yes, the climate, temperature increase has affected the weather, which is different than the climate, in this area much, much more than in other areas. Some areas get colder, other areas get more fire, other areas get drought, other areas are getting more rain, more tornadoes, more chaotic weather. Things are shifting, things are changing all throughout the world. Everything's not necessarily 100% consistent, but this area is one of the areas where if people were there, they would absolutely, without question, say, oh yeah, this may have been gradual. This is way hotter than it was 30 years ago. This is way hotter than it was 40 years ago. Maybe subtle, and maybe the youngest generations here, the teens and 20s, may not notice because they weren't around before this. No, they weren't. But it is much hotter here. Much, much hotter here. Maybe even slightly unbearable. Well, let's be real. A lot of these places are already slightly unbearable. Near the equator. I haven't been, so doesn't come automatically to my mind. But it is known that some of these places are hot, and steamy, and they'll give you a heat stroke. You'll get all sorts of heat-borne bodily problems, I forget what the other one is. Heat stroke and heat something. I should know these things. I've taken first responder courses. This is why people get research. This is also why people keep, journals and books and things, information on them that I'm not going to read through right now. Nonetheless, it's really hot. Really, really, really hot. And this volcano just so happens to be ready to burst. And normally what happens with these strawberries when a volcano erupts is they, the seeds, let's be specific, the seeds of these strawberries fly out into the air and, become a part of the rock, the lava rock, this molten dark, blackened colored stuff, and just stays there, dormant. not really able to sprout or grow in this much colder climate. But nonetheless, these strawberries have a much higher tolerance than they need to have, being so deep in the earth. It wasn't so much an intentional genetic trait based on any sort of history that the strawberries had down deep below. But nonetheless, it is there. The strawberries just so happen to be able to grow in this slightly hotter temperature, whereas before, not so much. And something that hasn't been seen or explored or found by scientists just so happened to happen this year, which we'll say is 2030. 2030, I want to change that. I want to change that right now. Improvised in the middle of storytelling. You get a revision as you're listening. I don't know if you'll appreciate it or not, but here it is. 2050. Yes. It is 2050. Oh, crap. No, it can't be that. Never mind. 2030. No. 2025. We have solidified the revision to 2025. So, about a little under 10 years from now? A lot under 10 years from now. 6 years from now, about, I think. Not going to do the math. If I'm wrong, live with it. Or comment below at how angry you are that I did the wrong math, or how happy you are that I did the right math. Anyways. Oh, yes, these strawberries. They're strong. They're of the earth. In fact, now that they're above this plant, the stem of it, the roots of it, the seeds of it, the stuff that just buds out the very top of it is actually hard like rock at this point. And since it's in the middle of, hardened magma, basically hardened lava at this point, into rock itself, it breaks through. Has to break through all this rock and crack. And slowly, like many plants through rocks, makes its way up to the surface. Now, this is a very heavily water-based plant. I don't really think that there's water in the core of the earth, per se. Pretty sure it's mostly just mineral. But I could be wrong. Nonetheless, even if it deals with water, it's not the kind of water you'd find up here. So it finds other points of sustenance. In fact, its roots that are starting to sprout out of the seed, the germination actually coming from just the mineral around it. It's dry germination. I know you've never heard of one, because they probably don't exist. But it's a dry germination. It's a germination based solely on heat. And then the roots start to grip into these hardened rock minerals, and like little mouths just start to munch on them. And not quite like little mouths, more like the roots just start breaking this up little until the area around these roots actually becomes dirt. Yes, these roots are basically like worms as well. It's a very, very, it's a plant from the core of the earth. This thing, to survive in such harsh conditions, to be the most adaptive plant that ever existed, that ever was, that ever will be. Yes, this plant, super adaptive, super capable, super willful and lively, strong and durable. This plant is able to create soil below itself that its roots can actually gain nutrients from without water and without organic materials other than its own. You know, like leftover magma pollens that have become lava pollens, that have become hard, earthy pollens from years past. Yes, yes, yes! These roots! This is a slow story, guys. And gals, and gals. Because, you could say dude and you could say guy in a very unisex way. I know some people disagree. But, shove it. Shove it. This, I will call you dudes and I will call you guys. No matter your gender or non-gender conformation, whatever. You're dudes, okay? You're guys. You're not bros. Let's be real, that one, absolutely, it's pretty gendered. Maybe it can be reclaimed to a non-gender conforming thing at some point in the very, very distant future beyond where we are now, because no one will accept that shit right now. But, bros, it's not a unisex term. At least not in my context, and not in pretty much everyone's context. Maybe you're the rare person out there who wants to call ladies bros. Anyways. So, after ages and ages of pushing upward through hard rock. Actually, I don't know how hard it is. I believe it isn't that porous? It's kind of porous, right? Been a long time since I've had my hands on even a small chunk of such a thing. But it's still hard rock. It's still made out of black, dark minerals. From the center of the earth. I do believe that's the hardest minerals. I believe the hardest stuff gets to the bottom. I don't know. I'm not. Geologists, feel free to slap down this piece of poor fiction or poor science, but mostly just fiction. After hours and hours and days of pushing upward, pushing, the stem growing. This black, dark stem eventually sprouts outward and meets the air for the first time. Again, this plant, super adaptive. So even though this is the first of its kind to ever really grow anywhere in an airy, oxygenated place, does so quite handily. In fact, it thrives. It quickly sprouts up. And, not so much, based on, genetic adaptations, evolution, because evolution doesn't happen this quickly. Maybe more so in as more of this, so much as like in a mutation. This plant starts to develop and change and shift a little bit, and starts to be able to take in these. I guess plants mostly take in CO2. Um, but it's right next to a volcano. I'm sure there's some 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 nice gaseous stuff that it starts to take in. And these leaves that were once very gooey and oozy start to sprout. This is a long description of this plant. And finally, a bunch of these plants start growing out. These strawberries start growing out of the rock where they'd never grown out of before. And they start to grow and grow and get bigger and bigger. And there are some pretty large strawberries. And they're all over this rock. All over the side of this hill that was once crazy volcanic madness just a little while ago. And as the days and weeks go on, these strawberries, they start to grow even more. And they start to look like genuine plants. They're not green. They're not needing the chlorophyll from the sun because they've never seen the sun. No, they're getting all their resources and nutrients from elsewhere. So they're dark. Black at first, but maybe a little browning as time goes on, as they're adapting to the environment around them. And as June rolls around, the leaves start to lighten even more into a rich golden color. Don't ask me how this happens. Perhaps just from the gases that it would not normally have, this plant has started to gain other things that are more yellow in nature. It's gold. It's like fool's gold. It doesn't necessarily shine, but it has that same hue of yellow and orangey, almost oranginess. That bright color. And the strawberries that have started to sprout, not white, but black. Again, these also start to change color. And first into a dark, lava-y red. But then as they start to mature, they start to go to a deep reddish orange. Wish I knew a combo color name for reddish orange. I know there's one out there, I think, but reddish orange! Somewhere so at the point, at the crux of red and orange that it's not necessarily more red or more orange than orange or red. But also, as the time has been going on, it's been raining. This is a tropical environment. There's lots of rain. It's been raining days and days and weeks and weeks. And as it's been raining, this plant, this strawberry, has been, excreting, seeping out, some of its raw materials. And that materials have been trickling down to the ocean, and from the ocean, they've been joining and mixing and churning with the water, and after days and days and weeks of this, the pollens from these flowers and the other excretions of this plant have mixed, have gone through ocean currents and spread deeply throughout the waters of the world. And even though there's only little bits and pieces from, maybe 1,000 plants at most. These plants are very, very potent. And these mixtures have been getting into the water. And they've actually, the pollens and the excretions are actually so finite. So finite, so thin, so narrow. Like many other microbial-like things, they can get through filters and they get around everywhere and water sources and all around the world. So needless to say, people have been drinking this very, very, very potent, very, very small, minute, maybe even untraceable amount of, let's call it, earthy strawberry dust from the core of the earth. And like I said, it's very, very potent stuff. And just like the core of the earth, just like these strawberries being very adaptive and strong and powerful and willful and able to live within any sort of environment. It's not really cold, at least, but hot environments and fiery environments and constantly churning and grinding and pressuring environments. This heavy place, deeply grounded. These traits, this energy, this buildup, the way this plant is and exists, also just happens to be the potent effects of these flowery, microbial, polleny, strawberry goodness. It doesn't have a strawberry flavor. Nobody notices it. Like I said, it may not even be traceable. So the people testing waters might not even notice it, but eventually they will. And when they do, it'll be trace amounts of something that they've never seen before. Something that they've never scientifically explored, Might have a relative around the Earth, because it's not necessarily alien in nature. But nonetheless, genetic variation that's never been under. So nonetheless, it's completely new, but it's and even then, it's in such small trace amounts that they think nothing of it. It may be a little concerning at first, but like very small doses of mercury. They put it in people's shots, the mercury anyway. They put it in shots and vaccines and things like that, it's not enough to make you go crazy. So, this being just as small of an amount, and these scientists thinking just like any other scientist thinks in these days, or at least the ones that have anything to do with policy, have anything to do with law, have anything to do with politics, they're not going to do anything about it. They'll write it down in their reports, note it, experiment with it, maybe do some studies on it if money is allocated, or if a scientist comes up with the curiosity enough to try and push that and try and propose it, bring it to a scientific journal, however this process works, which I'm sure is not very versatile. Else we'd have a lot more exploration than we do right now, into a lot of not so money making territories. Anyways. But what they don't understand, what they have not comprehended, is how potent this is. Even this small amount that has been getting into the water sources has been having a slow and gradual effect on people, making them more adaptable, making them stronger, making them braver and more willful, making them more intellectually savvy and grounded. And slowly, it's been having an effect on every part of society around the world. slowly you see, even with our expanding growth that we have now, this growth has been gradually increasing in a way that is a bit more gradual than normal. It's if it was rising like this, at a slope like this, at a very slow trend upward, um now it's rising. Now it's started to rise up a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. As these plants start to go, it's people are starting to grow exponentially. They're starting to heal much quicker. They're starting to emotionally heal much quicker. They're getting rest when they need to. They're becoming more active when they need to be active. They're becoming more intuitive and knowledgeable and knowing when they need to move and when they need to stop and slow down. They're the people who are more intellectual are gaining more information. They're since they're resting when they need to, their brains are able to process this stuff much quicker. And the same thing goes with the physical strength and not overworking oneself. And people are becoming physically stronger and more built. And people are becoming mentally stronger and emotionally stronger and more able to handle the chaos and the controversy of the world and the constant flame wars on social media and the overwhelm of floods of information that normally they would just have to adapt and handle, which, I mean, they are already adapting and handling to some degree, but it's becoming more easy. The process is becoming, people are able to make changes much quicker. And all of a sudden, certain things that were happening much slower start to come into much faster fruition. People start, the green energy initiatives that have been pushed for are, that have taken a foothold at this point at 2025 are now starting to take an even stronger foothold. The fossil fuel industries, the people there are starting to, finally go through all the stages of grief and realize that their industry is not going to last. And finally are starting to come much, much quicker than they were before to acceptance that they need to move on. And quite honestly, they're able to handle it a lot better than they would have expected, than they would have in the past. And why? All because of this strange strawberry plant growing somewhere deep in the tropics that no one's found or even knows about yet, because it's far, far away from civilization. And the same thing happens, truthfully, with economics and with the balance between, if there is a balance between competition and community, between cooperation and competition, between trying, the people who desire everyone to have a right to live and have right to health care and have right to, good food and, your basic needs to survive, all the freedom-loving people out there and right-loving people out there. And all those people who strive to get ahead and push forward and reach higher heights and higher peaks and want to compete against each other. And these wars over resources have become more and more meaningless because these people start to realize and start to see finally the long-term implications of it. The short-term profits that have been benefiting them, all of a sudden they start realizing, well, my job, 10 or 20 years from now, maybe I should be starting to think about how beneficial that will be and how my short-term profits right now might be really great for my, potentials for golden parachutes or whatever the hell I'm dealing with right now. But honestly, it's like, if I take risks right now, think of all the profits I might be making 20, 30 years down the line. Everything starts to shift and change. and people start to become what the spiritual types call a lot more enlightened. You know, um, maybe in the scientific or at least sociology types too. Maybe because the Enlightenment. I don't know. Maybe that was a spiritual thing, a spiritual historical moment. Uh, the Renaissance. I would think of it as maybe similar time as well. And as things start to change, people start to see these changes start to happen. The years go on. People start getting elected into office who are vastly more progressive. Vastly more. Whatever the most progressive version of a right wing philosophy is. Vastly more populous than ever was seen in politics before, and the shift is so drastic that no one saw it coming. And and these changes start happening faster than anyone ever predicted they could happen. These industries start shifting and adapting. People start moving more quickly than they normally would. From industry to industry, finding adaptive ways to get training and that they might not have otherwise been able to. Finding the bravery and the willpower within themselves to be ambitious when they might not have otherwise been, even knowing how in many ways this society, this economy, not necessarily being as friendly to those ambitions, being as helpful to those ambitions as people might like them to be. And of course, as these people are making these moves, the moves are happening on the political level as well. So slowly, but much quicker than before, these things are starting to actually become more available to people who otherwise might not be, and the people who are on the bottom, slower rungs, who are trying to make their way up, or suicide rates are going down and crime rates are going down. The crimes that actually should be crimes anyway. Plenty of people are doing loads of drugs. And maybe they're stealing food if they need it. And certain little chaotic, supposedly chaotic societal things are happening, and the political philosophies and things, ideologies are starting to become more grounded and apparent. So even though it's not becoming one unified philosophy, it's a bunch of people. So a bunch of people with majorly competing philosophies, but all of them are starting to flower, and bloom themselves into all the weak ones. There might be a little growth there, but the amount of dropping from the weaker philosophies, the more propaganda-esque philosophies, the ones that don't benefit the people who are actually buying into them. These ones are, they have both a growth and a decline at the same time. So, people aren't seeing these in studies. They're seeing all sorts of crazy stuff going on. No one's able to necessarily predict in a very intuitive way how it's going, because there's growth in this philosophy, but also, since it's a super regressive philosophy, there's sinking in it as well, and people are becoming more religious and other people are becoming less religious, and tons of people are becoming more sexual and getting into the porn industry and maybe getting into prostitution or pushing for the decriminalization of sex work, while others are becoming, less like that. And, tons of people are going into every single belief, even the more crazy ones, and diving out of those ones as well. Everything's happening and churning and crazily changing at a rate that has never been seen before. And nonetheless, a lot of these predictive factors are not looking positive, and people are freaking out as they normally would. But others are able to find a grain of truth that they wouldn't otherwise find in it. Some people are able to intuit it and figure out on their own, and people start to some people, the right people, the people who are already focused on that kind of thing, are starting to suddenly realize that no, these changes are actually really fantastic. Fantastic. It's like that there's the obvious ones, but even the unobvious ones, some people are realizing, yeah, these ones are great too. And after this, after this period goes on for a few years, these strawberries are growing their way inside an unknown area of a tropical forest, deep in an uncivilized part of the equator. Maybe another volcano explodes, and more strawberries come out. More seeds start sprouting up, and more pollen start floating through the air for the first time ever, and getting into the oceans and mixing in with the water, and people are drinking them. And the rates are increasing, and scientists are starting to become a little bit more curious about this, maybe even a lot more curious about this. So the years start going on, and studies are finally starting to come out, and people are starting to figure out, okay, this is a pollen of a plant that we've never seen before that looks like a strawberry, but where is this strawberry? We haven't found this strawberry, and maybe there's some genetic traits that they're able to identify where they might be able to locate it or something like that. I don't know. But nonetheless, the curiosities are almost unending about, finally it's, after a few years, it starts to come out in a scientific journal, and the study maybe makes it into a newspaper. And people suddenly, maybe another scientist makes the connection between, okay, the increase in the strangely increasing growth and the appearance of this strawberry pollen, this very microbial strawberry pollen that can't be filtered out of the drinking water, seems to be about right, coinciding. Let me do a study on this. Sure enough, the study tends to prove it, and after, maybe fast forward another few 10 or 20 years, people have finally mitigated the problems that we thought would be seriously major problems. Maybe there was a lot of chaos on the way. Maybe there was a lot of adaptation, a lot of scientific developments that you never might have expected might have come up. A lot more movement than ever was anticipated to get these processes in place, and finally 100% zero carbon emissions, green energy economy. Nuclear's gone too. Well, maybe not fully so, but for the purposes of getting rid of nuclear waste, it's gone. But maybe for some weird purposes of, scientific exploration, there might be a few power plants still in existence. But certainly not for the energy consumption, because everything else is, why do we need it, at that point? The economy's grown, public transportation, tons of public utility-like things, huge supportive social, social net of cooperation and coordination. Competition still surely exists because it's a very natural human thing, just not in the, just not in the, what would you call it? Be successful at the expense of other people's death at the very bottom kind of competition. Or like, oh, the bottom's this nice little, safe, cushy area, but the top, maybe not ideal. Everyone has desires that reach way, way further up than that. But the top is, the top itself becomes a much more magnificent, flourishing thing because, much like a human body, that which is grounded also nourishes the brain. If you have an ergonomically successful body, a body that can, you don't have pencil legs. You're able to, stand up with good posture. Which helps with emotions and lowering stress levels and all sorts of other things. And the same holds true to society. And those at the very competitive top of the society as well. By raising up the bottom, they have found over the course of these years that they've raised up the top too, strangely enough. And many more years go by, and even media's come along the way. They're a lot less post-apocalyptic. Um, Media ventures are being produced, and a lot more utopia society being produced, because strangely enough, that's the direction people believed for such a long time, that that's only something that can happen in fiction. It couldn't possibly happen in reality. The narrow-minded naysayers thinking that having such a narrow and pessimistic view on society means that they're being objective, when in reality, pessimism is, let's face it, more focused on the negative, more focused from a place of the negative emotional standpoints, and not nearly objective, because in reality, anything's possible. The post-apocalyptic stuff is just as possible as the utopian societies. The dead center might be the most historically visible and most represented, but, innovations happen in societies, and stuff changes and shifts in ways that we've never seen before. Communication, the internet may have been seen as a fiction, 300, 400 years ago, who knows, or even sooner than that, lots of, those narrow-minded pessimists that maybe were true for the time, maybe were right for the time and right for, X amount of years after that, were damn well proven wrong at the point when the internet came around. And it just so happens that in this circumstance, in this story, what changed these expectations, what shifted this society and moved it in a more upward direction, happened to be earthy, corey strawberries in a tropical area. And by this point in time, way, way down in the future, people have actually found these strawberries deep inside the tropics and taken them back to other societal warm areas of climate, and they have started to grow them and and eat them as well. And these strawberries, not gooey like in the earth, and not hard like they are when they first come out of the ground. Nice texture, just like regular strawberries up above. They're, once again, that reddish orange right in the dead center of that. And just as said way at the beginning of the story, kind of nutty and sweet. Very earthy and unique. Flavor that's never been explored before, and starts to become the most popular thing inside cookbooks and amongst people making delicious foods all over across the world. And the benefits of these strawberries for adaptability, for growth inside a person once they actually eat the strawberry and not just drink the pollen in the water, are exponentially higher. And this helps the growth towards this more utopian, beautiful society that comes out of the chaos of, the this modern era that we're in presently right now.